but since she identifies as a female and wants her name to reflect that identification, was underage, it's now Robin.
Just what we need after another national tragedy, terrible media coverage that hopelessly divides our country. We're going to break this down and so much more on today's episode of the Brad vs. Everyone podcast, my daily show where we take on the craziest ideas from across the internet, our media, and our politics, all from an independent perspective. Now, we cover media insanity and terrible coverage and examples of awful journalism on this show in great detail, so unfortunately, there's a lot of that going on right now in the aftermath of a horrifying mass shooting in Minneapolis targeting a Catholic school where 2 innocent young kids' lives were lost and dozens more were hurt or scarred or traumatized. It's one of those things that just to any normal person is so senseless and so heartbreaking, but you would think it wouldn't have to become culture war fodder or immediately be consumed by media malpractice, but you would be wrong. First, here is a clip summarizing what happened from the Minneapolis chief of police.
2 young children, ages 8 and 10, were killed where they sat in the pews. Their parents have been notified. 17 other people were injured, 14 of them being children. 2 of those children are in critical condition. The coward who fired these shots ultimately took his own life in the rear of the church. Our hearts are broken for the families who have lost their children, for these young lives that are now fighting to recover, and for our entire community that has been so deeply traumatized by this senseless attack.
Now, guys, the first thing, and this is going to be very relevant throughout today's episode, that is already causing chaos and controversy, is that this shooter, whose name I won't mention, I don't really believe in publicizing the shooters. They often want that. Apparently, was transgender or identified as transgender. So this was a male who at one point identified as a woman and changed his name to a more feminine name and changed his gender on some documents or what have you. I will be referring to him as a male because that's what he is. But apparently, CNN, at least CNN host Jake Tapper, wants you to remember the importance of respecting this mass murderer's identity and feelings. Take a listen to this.
Another piece of the puzzle as to who the shooter was. The Minneapolis Star Tribune says, according to court records, because there's been some confusion about what the shooter's name was.
Yes.
Robin Westman's mother applied to change her child's name in 2019. It was at one point Robert Paul Westman.
Correct.
But since she identifies as a female and wants her name to reflect that identification, was underage, it's now Robin Westman.
No. I will not be calling this person she or her. This person is not and was never biologically female. And frankly, I don't give a shit about respecting your pronouns. One, this person is dead now, so they're not feeling anything, any type of way about anything, except maybe in hell where they're burning. But yeah, I don't care about your feelings. I'm not trying to be polite or nice to you if you do a shooting at a school. I don't care. I really don't. And frankly, intentionally, I may disrespect you because you are the textbook example of a human not worthy of respect, not because you're trans, but because of the actions that you've taken. And I'm willing to use people's pronouns in many situations where you have an actual trans person with gender dysphoria, but we should all be clear about what's happening there is we are engaging in a social fiction for the purposes of being polite and being courteous. And when you violate the social contract in such an egregious way, I therefore feel no desire to ever be courteous or polite to you ever again. And then there's like an actual factual reality that becomes obfuscated when media coverage bends to this kind of gender identity as sacrosanct philosophy that I'm going to show you infiltrated the New York Times' reporting on this. We're going to get into it after this. If you've been living on credit cards to cover your gas, groceries, and bills, you know those interest rates are brutal. So why keep paying 20% interest or more to the banks when you could call my friends at American Financing today? They have mortgage rates in the 5s, and they are showing people every day how to keep more of their hard-earned money in their pockets and out of the hands of credit card companies. Right now, American Financing is helping homeowners save an average of $800 a month by using their home equity to wipe out high-interest debt, with no upfront fees, no obligation, and just a 10-minute call to a salary-based mortgage consultant. And here's the kicker. If you start today, you could delay 2 mortgage payments, putting more cash in your hands. So don't wait. Call American Financing now at 866-891-4811. That's 866-891-4811. 866-891-4811, or visit americanfinancing.net/Brad Polumbo. You'll be glad you did. Now, back to today's show. So the New York Times, in its reporting on this shooter, basically presented the story as if a female, as if just an everyday woman had gone out and committed a mass shooting, which, as you probably know, is statistically incredibly rare. Here's their headline. Minneapolis suspect knew her target, but motive is a mystery. The shooter who attacked a Catholic school on Wednesday posted social media videos and writings that betrayed a litany of grievances and obsessions. Now, some people on the right have been attacking the Times or other mainstream media outlets for saying the motive is unclear. When this person attacked the Catholic school, they had all these public statements about many charged topics. I think it's somewhat defensible to say that the motive is unclear, though, from a journalistic perspective, because of all the possible motives, all the insane hatred and possible personal connections. We're not really sure which specifically one drove the event. So I'm not even necessarily critiquing the Times for that part. But when you put her in a headline, most people reading that will think you are referring to a woman. But in this case, you are referring to a male, a man. And unfortunately, most people don't read past the headline. But even if they do, even if they read several paragraphs into this story, they will come away with no idea that the person who committed this shooting was a male, which is relevant because biology affects rates of violence in populations. It's just a fact. Males are much more likely to commit these kinds of atrocities than females. Here are the opening paragraphs of this Times story. The person who the police say opened fire on a Catholic school in Minneapolis on Wednesday appears to have known the school well. That person, who officials said strafed the church through the stained glass windows, killing 2 children, was believed to have once attended the school at Annunciation Catholic Church, according to a law enforcement official with knowledge of the investigation. Her mother, Mary Grace Westman, worked in the business office of the church 5 years before retiring in 2021. And Ms. Westman, armed with 3 weapons, seemed to choose the time carefully. She barricaded the doors during the first all-school mass of the academic year, but it is hard to fathom what drove Ms. Westman to attack before killing herself. And then again, they multiple times say Ms. Westman. Is the Ms. in the room with us? Because this is a male who, from what I've seen, hadn't even medically transitioned and was just insane and confused, and apparently also thought they were transgender. The idea that the Times is taking this person's preferences and presenting them as truth at the expense of readers factually getting to know what happened here is insane to me and is total media malpractice. I mean, you don't learn until the 8th paragraph of this Times story that this shooter is actually a male. How is that accurate or correct? Seriously, I don't understand this. And even then, it's some sort of convoluted reference to the fact that the shooter changed their gender on forms. They don't even say, this is a biological male who identified as a woman. That would be accurate, right? That would be a statement of fact. It is crazy to let activist ideologies warp your presentation of the truth in America's most preeminent newspaper still today, the New York Times. And again, I think it comes at the expense of an important fact and reality about this. So not only are you like accommodating the preferences of the deceased evil human, which I'm just not sure why we would do, but you are also actually obfuscating an important reality. Because what matters in terms of like rates of violence in society is biology. Biologically speaking, males as a class of humans versus females are much more violent and commit much more violent crime in society. And that is like an important statistical phenomenon that affects our approach to crime and safety and many other things. And yet people are coming away with the idea that women are committing crimes that actually men are committing because reporters are so committed to an activist ideology or so scared of the activists who will attack them if they misgender a mass shooter. Tell those people to go themselves, be disrespectful to mass shooters, and report the truth. How is that a hot take? How is this even something controversial? I really don't understand. You guys, though, let me know what you think. Are you as horrified by this kind of mainstream media coverage as I am? Let me know in the comments. Make sure you're subscribed and do hit that like button while you are at it. But guys, it is not just the mainstream media or CNN that is misleading people or covering this in a terrible way. Frankly, it is also almost all right-wing and conservative media and Republicans more broadly. They are seizing on this horrific event to promote false narratives that are just not based in facts and reality about trans people, the trans population, the trans community, which y'all know I'm very critical of the trans movement, the trans activists, all of this. But ultimately, my source that I come back to, my guiding principle is truth and fact. And I'm also just against blanket demonizations of entire groups of people based on the actions of individuals. But apparently, many in conservative media are not, because they are taking this one horrific incident in Minneapolis and a couple others like it that have occurred over the last several years, and they are suggesting that the entire trans population or movement or what have you is violent and dangerous, and that this is a trend and a wave that is out of control. Don't take my word for it. Here's a compilation of everybody from Daily Wire to Fox News to Newsmax spinning this exact narrative.
The trans terrorism epidemic continues, and it's only getting worse. It's time to be brutally honest about this problem.
Statistically, the trans population has been prone to violence. That's not villainizing, that's reality. And if you can't recognize reality, you're in danger. You see it, I see it. The trans clan has a militant wing, and it's out for blood. They're taking lives, defiling churches, and freaking everybody out.
There is a trans violence crisis in this country, and half the country, many of the same people who voted for Kamala Harris just don't seem to care. A trans shooter in a state where Democrats have made it perfectly clear that they support the insanity that this has become, what we now call the trans community in this country.
It's not just them. This is all over social media. And some of the biggest voices on the right online are spreading this exact message. Elon Musk shared the news of the trans shooter being trans and said, there is a clear pattern here. Benny Johnson, the star MAGA YouTuber, wrote, one thing is very clear. The trans movement is radicalizing the mentally ill into becoming violent terrorists who target children for murder. The pattern is undeniable. It's actually not undeniable because I deny it. It's not happening. It's not supported by the actual facts and statistics when you look into it. This is not correct. The data do not support this narrative. They love to share these cherry-picked lists of trans or non-binary shooters, but they often list several that actually aren't. To be very clear, there are 5 confirmed examples where mass shooters either identified as transgender or non-binary. That is out of a population that consists of more than 2.8 million people over the age of 13, according to the Williams Institute. 5 people out of nearly 3 million, and you are drawing sweeping conclusions about a whole population and community. That is statistically illiterate, wildly unfair, and frankly immoral to do, to castigate millions of people because of the actions of a few. Same way it would be to look at all these mass shooters and say, oh, they're almost all male. I guess all men are violent and dangerous and bad. Of course, that's not true. And at least in that case, you even have an underlying overrepresentation. You don't have that when it comes to trans people. It's just the facts. I do not ever shy away from criticizing trans and trans activism and all that. But at the end of the day, the facts are not there behind all these claims. Many of these monologues don't even reference statistics at all. They just assert the claim as fact. And when you look at the actual statistics that we have about this, it's just not true. For example, the Violence Project, which defines a mass shooting as 4 or more people being shot and killed, excluding the shooter, in a public location with no connection to underlying criminal activity such as gangs or drugs. Well, they identified out of a list of nearly 200 mass shootings that 98% were committed by people who were male, 2% were committed by people who were female, and less than 1% were committed by people who identified as transgender. Obviously, the numbers there are rounded up. Now, I prefer those numbers because when we talk about a mass shooting, we're not talking about gang drive-bys or kind of drug deals gone wrong or other things, which if you just look at shooting and don't really have any nuance to it, that is counted. And we're also not talking really about incidents where people don't die, where they're just injured, but some more expansive databases like the Gun Violence Archive, which we're about to look at, they just look at any instance where 4 or more people are shot, and they don't really add much qualifiers to it. Even instances where no one died, even instances where it's related to like a gang or something like that, they just cast a very wide net. So we have one data source that kind of narrowly looks at it, and then another one that casts a very wide data set. And they have mass shootings by gender status, 2018 to 2023. They have 2,826 mass shootings under their expansive definition committed by people who were not transgender, and 3 that were committed by people who were confirmed to be transgender. Even if you add in the instance that just happened, even if you count a couple of these ones that are not verified, that they like to put in their lists that they share in their infographics, the people spreading this narrative, the numbers are not there to suggest that trans people are massively overrepresented in mass shootings. The facts just don't support this claim. And guys, it would be very easy for me to lean into this narrative for clicks and just be like, the trans agenda out of control, they're getting violent. But I respect you far too much to lie to you. And I can only tell you what the factual truth is. And it is not what these people are saying. Now, all across right-wing internet circles, they're sharing this graph that they say proves what they're claiming, but it really doesn't. I want to show it to you. It says mass shooting rates by demographic, 2015 to 2025. Public incidents with 4 or more fatalities expressed as rates per million population. They then compare trans/non-binary to Asian, Black, White, Hispanic, and Native American. Do you see the problem with that? We're comparing races to genders, and then the people who are trans are also going to be counted in the races. This makes no sense. And also, I've looked and I see them sharing this everywhere. It has no data sources cited for any of the numbers. It's just a graph some dude made and posted on X, as far as I can tell. But none of the numbers are cited or sourced in any way. But even taking this number, which I do not think is correct or real, this graph that they are showing to prove this point, what they have found is 0.718 per million trans/non-binary mass shooters. Round that up to 1. Then what you are saying is 1 out of 1 million trans or non-binary people are shooters. Do you really think that proves that this is an inherently dangerous, violent, radical community? Do you hear yourself? Do you know how many people a million people is? That you have 999,000 plus 999 more, and just one of them is an evil, violent psychopath who would do a mass shooting. Taking these, I totally unverified, I don't think are correct numbers, taking them as true totally decimates the narrative they're citing this graph to prove. Because 1, they're not even comparing it to men and women, which is what you would actually compare it to. Trans, men, women. That would be the interesting comparison. Why aren't they doing that? Probably because the men would be higher than the trans. That if we're being so for real, if we're keeping it 100. But regardless, this bizarre, uncited, totally unverified graph they're citing does not in any way lead credence to the claims they are making about trans epidemic of violence. What a violent, radical community. I do not understand this as an expression of anything other than raw emotion and outrage and, frankly, motivated by animus. But to quote these same types, facts don't care about your feelings, and the facts do not support this blanket demonization of transgender people because of the actions of a few fringe individuals. I'm just trying to be honest with you guys. I'm just trying to tell you the truth as I see it. And I don't think these people care. I think they just have landed on a narrative and decided to run with it. And that narrative is impervious to statistics or facts. You even asked Grok, Elon Musk's hand-designed AI, to fact check this. He'll come back with the same information I showed you, not anything proving these people's claims. But I will always be honest with you. Whether you agree with me or you disagree with me, I will always give you my honest opinion about what is happening and what's happening right now. I've been so critical of trans activists in the community, I think is wildly unfair to them. I've known trans people over the years, but even if I'd never had a transgender friend or anyone, I would never support blanketly blaming or condemning millions of people because of the actions of a few, whether that was being done to Catholics, whether it was being done to gay people, Black people. I think people are individuals and they're responsible for themselves and their own actions, not for the actions and behavior of people that check off the same box on the census as them. And I will stick to that. And frankly, I would argue that even if they were massively overrepresented, still not really on anyone's shoulders except the people that did it and people who encouraged it explicitly. Anyone else is not to blame for it. But even now, that's not even the underlying case. The numbers are not there. And again, I respect you guys too much to lie to you. Whereas I think a lot of these people just hop on a narrative and tell you what they think will go viral, will resonate, will rile people up. I'm never going to do that. And if you don't agree with me, that's always okay. I'm always open to hearing about it from you guys, but all I can do is tell you the truth as I see it. And on this one, I think they are totally wrong, and I just can't get on board with this narrative that's emerging. But what do you guys think? Let me know in the comments. Make sure you're subscribed if you aren't yet, and do hit that like button while you are at it. Now, one final piece of this I want to talk about is the truly bizarre take that Candace Owens put out after this shooting. You probably know of Candace. She is a super popular right-wing YouTuber and influencer, very controversial over the years. She loves herself a good conspiracy theory, and I think she's finally taken that too far. I mean, honestly, frankly, she took it too far a while ago in my view, but after this, you should change how you look at her after this. Here is how she responded to this shooting at the Catholic school in Minneapolis. She tweeted on August 27, the day of the shooting, "The government is behind this. Period." No evidence, nothing to back up that claim, that extraordinary claim, just asserting it blindly to millions of people. She continued, "Each shooting is more traumatizing than the last because the goal is to scare us into compliance. It is the tried and true strategy of 9/11 and the Manson murders, both CIA operations. Do not ever agree to hand over your Second Amendment rights." That tweet has more than 1.5 million views from Candace Owens. And I don't even want to get into the 9/11 conspiracies of it all, the Manson murders. I don't know anything about that one, but there is zero evidence at all that this terrible shooting in Minneapolis of this Catholic school was orchestrated by the CIA or by the government. She just made that up, asserted it as fact to millions of people. That is so grotesque. That is so irresponsible of a way to use your platform. That is so insulting to the victims and their families that you are using the tragedy they are still reeling from to go viral for conspiracy clickbait. It is genuinely disgraceful. And I just think that if you are a person with a public platform, you have a responsibility to only assert things you know to be true or have some reason to believe are true, not to just wildly spout off and pop off and say random shit and potentially mislead millions of people in the process. But frankly, Candace Owens does a lot of that these days, and I think it's to her eternal shame, Honestly, this is just obviously one story. It's just one post, though I imagine she'll double down on this on her podcast the next time she drops an episode. But this is the kind of thing that if somebody like this makes a claim like this, that is just so baseless and is never able to prove it or back it up, you can't just keep continuing to trust them, right? If they would lie to you once, or if they would be so reckless once, you've got to stop trusting them, because that means they would do it again. And they probably have done it many times. So it's up to you guys, but millions of people still tune in to Candace, and I think they should not. I think that is a serious mistake, because a person this detached from reality and a person this willing to throw around grave and seismic allegations with no evidence and not even bothering to try to pretend to present some, that is not a person you can trust as a source for information or perspectives. That's my opinion, at least. But you guys let me know what you think in the comments. And guys, that'll be it for today's episode of the Brad vs. Everyone podcast. Thank you all so much for tuning in. Please do make sure you're subscribed if you aren't yet. Do hit that like button while you are at it, and we will talk again real soon.